Welcome back, Trailblazers! This is episode 4 of our Honkai Star Rail Amphoreus journey. This time, the story focuses on the stories of Hyacinth and Cipher. But we are also at the end of our journey, so things are really starting to heat up. Not only have we managed to collect all 12 coreflames, but thanks to Herta and Screwlum, we also got a pretty good look at what Amphoreus looks like under the hood. Unfortunately, most of the stuff they're referencing is only outlined in 2 simulated universe expansions, which are both very, very long and released quite a while ago. So I decided to put together a complete chronological recap of those expansions, both Golden Gears as well as Unknowable Domain, which you can find in a separate video link below, alongside all of my theory thoughts for this version update. But don't worry, you don't need to watch that video, it's just there for your convenience, if you want it. But context is very important, so I will be providing a bare bones summaries of those simulated universe expansions in this video, so you don't really have to go looking for extra stuff elsewhere if you don't want to. But we've still got a lot to get through, so let's kick off this recap with a quick reminder of what happened in the last episode. Anaxa had been working on his theory of the soul prior to the fall of the Grove of Epiphany. This theory of his essentially boils down to the idea that everything in Amphoreus is made of memories, or rather, memoria, although he doesn't really know that it's called memoria. He also theorized that because the world was made of memories, that Kephale must be rebuilding the world based on their own memories, since they're the one who creates the world after the miracle of Genesis. To prove his hypothesis as quickly as possible, because he only had about 15 days to live thanks to the heavily fractured state of his soul, he needed direct access to Kephale and his memories. Access to Kephale, however, required the permission of the Council of Elders, so to get their approval, Anaxa promised to side with them during the next Citizens' Assembly, where he would vote against continuing the flame chase journey. Using the art of alchemy, which is really just what we call memoria manipulation on this planet, Anaxa accessed Kephale's memories and discovered that his theories were correct, and that Amphoreus was stuck in a cycle where Chrysos heirs who complete the flame chase journey become the Titans of the reborn world. He also discovered that Castorus was an heir from the previous cycle, reborn in the current cycle due to the actions of her twin Polixia, who was last seen in Styxia. So Castorus and the Trailblazer head there not just to recover Death's coreflame, but also to recover the Trailblazer's soul, because earlier when the Trailblazer and Mem took on Orynyx's trial, they learned that the Trailblazer had been dead since they arrived on Amphoreus, which meant that they lacked a future. Passing Orynyx's trial and living required recovering that lost future, which should be in Death's hands, hence the trip to Styxia. But Polixia had sacrificed her life to revive Castorus at the start of the cycle, so Castorus had to revive her using alchemy before embracing her and becoming the next demigod of death. She also revived the Trailblazer in the process, which was a nice bonus. Meanwhile, at the Citizens' Assembly, Anaxa betrayed the Council of Elders and voted to continue the flame chase journey. Satisfied that his theories had been proven correct and that he could ensure his return in the next cycle, Anaxa passed the trial of Circes and returned the coreflame of reason to the vortex of Genesis. The Trailblazer also returned the coreflame of death to the vortex on behalf of Castorus. Outside of Amphoreus, Black Swan confirmed Anaxa's theories about Amphoreus from an outside perspective, claiming that some of the Garden of Recollection were trying to unlock the secrets of Amphoreus for their own purposes, and that March's comatose state could be a consequence of that. And back inside Amphoreus, Herta managed to project herself into the outskirts of Amphoreus, the vortex of Genesis, where she encountered traces of the Trailblazer Dan Heng and the Flame Reaver before she was stopped by Lygus, who she identified as an Intellitron, much like Screwlum. Lygus reveals that Amphoreus was something like a prison containing a Lord Ravager, and Herta was forced to make a temporary retreat. And that's where our previous journey ended, but I don't really want to leave Herta just yet, so let's start this patch's recap off with her reappearance at the end of the quest, because Herta was most certainly not deterred by Lygus's meddling. Her temporary retreat only lasted as long as it took her to request help from Screwlum. After all, who better to counter the actions of an Intellitron like Lygus than the Emperor of Intellitrons himself? Screwlum manages to bypass the firewall Lygus set up to keep outsiders like Herta out of the core of Amphoreus by using a chronocognitive anchor he developed during a previous encounter with a similar planet to Amphoreus. But this only allowed the geniuses to project their data spirit entities inside of Amphoreus, which means that they can only observe Amphoreus and can't actually interact with it directly. And in the process of doing this, they appear to have killed Lygus, or at least destroyed the body that he was in. Herta at least believes that he's still alive and located somewhere else, and I agree with her. Herta also confirms that it's very likely March 7th is also trapped inside of Amphoreus, so they're gonna need to locate her as well as the Trailblazer and Dan Heng while they're in here. Now, while there are many problems left to solve, they have at least managed to uncover the truth behind the world of Amphoreus. That it's not actually a planet at all, but a Memoria-based simulation created and powered by Emperor Rupert II's Scepter. Now, if you don't know who Rupert is or what a Scepter is, this is where I'm going to remind you that I have put together a full breakdown of all of the lore involving both of these things in this video, alongside all of my theories about how it all plays into the purpose of Amphoreus. It is a bit of a long video because there's a lot to go through, but if all you want to do is understand the basics of what we're dealing with, here's what you need to know for now. Emperor Rupert I was a robot who launched a war against organic life forms because he thought that they were error-ridden and flawed. This war was called the First Machine War and started off as a show of brute force, but over time, Rupert I developed the anti-organic equation, which became the foundation for an antivirus software intended to assist inorganic life forms in the destruction of organic life forms. This miraculous achievement earned him the gaze of Noose and an invitation to become Genius Society member number 27. Over time, the anti-organic equation antivirus sort of turned into a mind virus that could infect both organic and inorganic life, driving them all to madness. This is very likely related to the Black Tide, although it is not yet confirmed. The First Machine War continued to ravage the galaxy until Genius Society member number 4, Polka Kakamon, assassinated Rupert I. But while that did end the First War, it wasn't the end of the Ruperts. As an organic life form, somehow managed to inherit the legacy and perhaps consciousness of Rupert I after solving the anti-organic equation, and then they became Rupert II. Rupert II launched the Second Machine War, but instead of focusing on means of physical annihilation, he created a network of powerful devices known as Scepters, which essentially functioned as a great cosmic brain extension that Rupert II controlled. The technology was meant to mimic the brain of Noose, with each Scepter functioning as an individual neuron, each one running on the anti-organic equation and capable of great feats like creating a planet out of nothing but particles, annihilating entire galaxies, and turning the universe into a giant hive mind. My favorite. Polka Kakamon eventually assassinated Rupert II as well, which put an end to the Second Machine War. The IPC then collected and seized the entire Scepter system and transferred it over to the Intelligentsia Guild for study, which led to yet another disaster called the Scholars' Strife, which eventually ended with a good chunk of the remaining Scepters destroyed and a lot of dead or mad scholars. But a few of these Scepters evaded capture, and among them were Scepters that specialized in running doomsday simulations based on various civilizations found throughout the galaxies. And Amphoreus just so happens to be one of those doomsday simulation Scepters. Although it does appear to be a little bit unique in the fact that it leverages Memoria instead of just being a digital simulation on its own. So we finally have our answer for why so much of Amphoreus is digitized and why it's stuck in a cycle. The simulation resets the loop with new variables as it explores different doomsday scenarios. Now, after finishing this version's quest, you should have received a text message from the Astral Express, which unlocks some optional post-quest dialogue. If you warp over to the seclusion zone in Herta space station, you're gonna find several memory bubbles which expand on the information I just presented. In these bubbles, you'll find information like Screwlum noting that he's found one of these Scepters before, and he became worried that the anti-organic equation within it could escape the Scepter simulation and spread throughout the universe again, which would be very, very bad. Just as bad as it was the first 2 times. So he had to disable that Scepter, and he might want to do the same to Amphoreus if another solution isn't found. But okay, now that we understand Amphoreus is a simulated Memoria world powered by a mechanical planet-sized neuron made by Emperor Rupert II, let's rewind a bit and check in with Dan Heng and Lygus in the Abyss. The goal of their trip is to investigate the somehow still burning Astral Express train car. Seriously, how is this thing still on fire? The whole arc with Anaxa in the Citizens Assembly took like 15 days, so we've been here for at least a few weeks. It kind of feels like the simulation is glitching out a little bit, and somehow no one has noticed. But anyway, Lygus claims that he can repair the train car and send Dan Heng and the Trailblazer back to the stars. When questioned about how he manages to repair something he's never seen before, Lygus claims his people, the Antikytherians, received this blessing as a gift from Kephale, which we already know is kinda BS because Lygus is an Intellitron. So it's pretty likely that Antikytherian is just another name for Intellitron. After all, the Antikytherians are named after the Antikytherian device, a computer-like machine used to calculate the position of the stars that was found among ancient Grecian ruins. Plus, we also know he's kind of like the overseer of the whole world at this point, so it's not really that shocking for him to claim that he can bypass Aquila's defenses in order to yeet the Nameless out of Amphoreus. And it is possible that he followed Rupert II, but somehow became isolated on this scepter after the Second Machine War ended, or perhaps he believes he has nowhere else to go. Like perhaps he thinks the planet has been destroyed, despite the fact that Screwlum now rules over the former Rupert Empire of Machines. Or he could be Rupert III, who allegedly doesn't exist yet, but it is possible that it could be Lygus. So that's fun. But Lygus and Dan Heng are interrupted by the arrival of a group of assassins known as the Cleaners. Great name. These guys make it their mission to thwart the Flame Chase journey by any means necessary and have been around for centuries. Kindness of the Council of Elders was a former Cleaner. In fact, she was the 27th in her line, which is kind of suspicious now that I think about it, because Emperor Rupert was number 27 of the Genius Society. And apparently, Cleaners use alchemy to inherit the memories, hatred, and identities of their predecessors, which is kind of what happens with the Ruperts. They sort of seem to jump bodies. I'm not really going anywhere with that, I just think it might be important to keep in mind. The Cleaners don't really get to do anything here, as Krateros and his Kremnoan soldiers swoop in with the declaration that Aglaea is dead. And we're gonna come back to this, but let's switch gears and check in with the Trailblazer and Cipher, because it's apparently treasure hunting in Styxia Day. And after disguising herself as a Flame Reaver to pull a quick prank on the Trailblazer, Cipher explains that the power of the Trickery Titan is the power of lies. The more people believe in a lie, the more real it becomes. If everyone believes in a lie, then that lie becomes reality. We don't really get the chance to do much treasure hunting though, because Phainon summons us for training at the Grove instead, where Mem busies herself with a scroll on divination. She's developed an interest in it, believing it to be a means by which she could lift the veil of fate that drapes over the uncertain future, or at least give people hope to face tomorrow with confidence. Phainon can't help but comment on how similar Mem's thoughts and interests are to Cyrene. Gee, I wonder why he thinks that. But their meeting is also interrupted by the Cleaners. But just as it was the case with Dan Heng and Lygus, the Cleaners are not here to kill them, they are merely a distraction. Bait to keep Phainon occupied while another group takes out their real target, which is Aglaea. Now, Aglaea could technically defeat the assassins in combat, but as Anaxa revealed before he departed, Aglaea's soul is terribly fractured and fragile. She doesn't have much time left as it is, so she bares her neck and relinquishes her life willingly, but not before entrusting several of her nymphs with her dying wishes. The effects of her death are felt around the world. For starters, the world-wound web goes down without her presence, effectively silencing all but critical long-distance communications. In Styxia, Cipher had recruited Bartolos to go treasure hunting with her in the Trailblazer's place, but they had to cut it short when they received Aglaea's final message, a heartfelt farewell from Aglaea to her dearest friend, and a plea for Cipher to return to Akama, lest the Flame Jace journey fail. Cartonis also receives a message from Aglaea as he's midway through forging a new sword for Phainon. She asks him to carry out a request that she made while she was still alive, to bind what's left of her soul's divinity to a simple bracelet that was given to her by a blind child. Despite its plain appearance, Aglaea considers the bracelet to be a perfect embodiment of beauty, because it's a heartfelt gift from a pure-hearted child. Beauty isn't all about being pretty, after all. This bracelet was to be given to Phainon upon his return to Akama, as he is the one who Aglaea wishes to entrust with the leadership of the Chrysos heirs. Of course, she tells him as much in a letter, but the reality of her death still hits him really hard. Cartonis then arrives to give Phainon the new blade he commissioned, the Dawn Maker, a blade forged in the image of the Flame Reaver's sword, which is a weird choice, Phainon, but okay. Cartonis also entrusts him with Aglaea's bracelet, and it's a good thing he does because it comes in real handy later. And amidst Phainon's rise to leadership, Cipher does in fact return to Akama and meets with him. He asks her to use the power of trickery to protect Kephale's coreflame while he's away fighting Aquila and trying to seize its coreflame. She agrees, after a little playful resistance, but little does he know that Cipher has been protecting both Kephale's coreflame and and Akama for hundreds of years. We'll come back to Cipher and her shenanigans, but our current priority is retrieving Aquila's coreflame, which means that we're gonna need to head into the sky. But the only person who can get us there safely without getting shot down is Hyacinth, a descendant of the Sky People. She is quite literally the only person who can retrieve the blessings of her ancestors, place them in the Chroma Coffer, and forge a rainbow bridge into the sky because she is the descendant of the Sky People's hero, Celiosi. More on her in a bit. Hyacinth's blessing collection requires a trip to the Vortex of Genesis, and fortunately, Dan Heng has figured out how to manipulate Fagusa's spirit waters to warp a single person to and from the Vortex from anywhere, anytime. So he just yeets her over there, and she chats with Cipher and Triby and another ancestor ghostie who reveals Hyacinth's prophecy. At the end of the Rainbow Bridge, the Skyfolk will mend dusk and dawn. The next ancestor is Hyacinth's grandmother, who tells her the legend of Celiosi, the Day Thunder Knight, the hero of the Skyfolk, and apparently, allegedly, Hyacinth's ancestor. The legend says that during the Chrysos War, when the Titans ravaged the Earth, Aquila looked upon the Skyfolk with disdain. So Celiosi took up arms, and with her beastly companions, Solibus and Lunibus, she trespassed upon Aquila's realm of twilight, intending to seize the core flame and quell Aquila's endless onslaught of thunderbolts and cyclones. She somehow slayed Aquila, but the sky itself began to crumble alongside its Titan, threatening the safety of the people of Amphoreus. So Celiosi merged with the Titan in order to hold up the sky, declaring that one day, a descendant of hers would ascend to the sky and seize the core flame from her. But legends aren't always what they appear to be. Regardless, Hyacinth forges the Rainbow Bridge and travels to the realm of twilight in the sky, accompanied by Phainon, Dan Heng, and the Trailblazer. Compared to the rest of Amphoreus, Hyacinth's ancestors had mastery over an extremely advanced amount of technology, and that, coupled with their inaccessible location, made them a military force even Castrum Kremnos couldn't conquer. Although it did make them quite isolated from everybody else, which led to a lot of infighting amongst the tribes, especially the tribes of the Sun Folk and the Rain Folk. In fact, the conflict between these two tribes was apparently one of the big reasons why the legendary Celiosi decided to challenge Aquila in the first place. Apparently, the Sun Folk tribe believed that Aquila favored them because they refused to allow the light of the sun to be covered by clouds and, it wasn't raining. So the Sun Folk persecuted the Rain Folk as an act of, reverence towards their Titan. However you want to put it, they really just thought they were doing what the Titan wanted. More on this in a bit. Venturing further inside the fortress, Hyacinth explains that within this twilight realm of her ancestors lies the celestial mural, which theoretically served as a reflection for the true sky. Whatever weather pattern appeared on the mural would therefore be reflected in the true sky. So she activates one of the celestial spheres and lights up the mural and reveals the eye of Aquila shining like a sun and watching them from behind the screen. But if they want to coax Aquila out of the mural, they're gonna need to activate more celestial spheres so they can change the bright sky into a cloudy one. After all, rumor has it that Aquila dislikes the clouds, hence why they were said to favor the Sun Folk. And as the party progresses even further into the fortress, they encounter the crystallized memories of Celiosi's companions, Solibus and Lunibus. With the help of Mem's memory reconstruction powers, they reveal the truth behind Celiosi's legend, because yes, the legend is kind of embellished, and the truth is a bit darker than you would want it to be. Celiosi was a child born of both feuding tribes. Her mother was from the Rain Folk and her father was from the Sun Folk. She was always ostracized by both tribes, but she was cast out entirely once they discovered that she possessed the golden blood of the Chrysos heirs. But despite her poor treatment, Celiosi blamed the gods, especially Aquila, for the suffering and strife between the tribes of the Skyfolk, and she wanted to slay the Titan to put an end to it all. Because if Aquila wasn't around to favor one tribe over the other, then obviously they would stop feuding, right? Well, after Aquila was conquered and submitted to Celiosi's will, the Skyfolk flew into a panic and fell into bouts of absolute madness, inflicting unspeakable horrors upon each other. At the request of the cleaners, they even hunted down those among them with golden blood for fear that they would slay another god like Celiosi had. Witnessing her people commit atrocities even without Aquila influencing them absolutely infuriated and devastated Celiosi. And since she had communed with the Titan at this point, she understood that Aglaea hadn't actually ever favored the Sun Folk over the Rain Folk. It was never their will to see the Rain Folk persecuted or the Sun Folk favored. Aglaea was merely afraid of the black tide that hid within the shadows that the dark clouds created, so they lit the sky as brightly as possible to keep watch as it encroached on their territory. And that meant that the Titan was not the source of her people's suffering. The Sky Folk were the source of their own suffering. After learning the truth and witnessing the horrors the Sky Folk tribes committed, she became convinced that humanity was the true source of evil. They were an incurable sickness. So she and her two faithful companions sought out the secrets of soul alchemy, which allowed her to fuse with Aglaea. And then she executed all Sky Folk, save for a few. One of those she spared was a nameless skyfolk with golden blood who begged for the chance to prove to Seleucia that humanity was capable of redemption, that they were something more than the mistakes they made. And she promised that if Seleucia let her live, one of her descendants would return to the sky and prove it. And in the meantime, her family would sing the praises of the legendary Seleucia. So Seleucia agreed to her terms and allowed the nameless heir to live, awaiting the day one of her descendants would return to the sky and prove that humanity was worth saving. And that descendant is Hyacinth. She's not descended of Seleucia at all. She's descended from a nameless sun folk. Solibus and Lunibus recognize the multifaceted nature of humanity and agree that Hyacinth is worthy of carrying that legacy as a healer rather than as a warrior. But the Seleucia-Aglaea hybrid isn't convinced. So with the help of Solibus and Lunibus, Phainon rips the Seleucia-Aglaea hybrid out of the mural, and let's just say they're not very happy about it. After one round, she destroys the supports of the platform that they're standing on, sending them all hurtling towards the pool of molten golden lava at the bottom of the fortress, which is in the sky. I don't understand how the lava is staying aloft in the sky, but I'm gonna ignore that for right now. Phainon destroys one of their eyes during their descent, but drops the bracelet containing Aglaea's remaining divinity. Fortunately, that turned out to be a boon, as a remnant of her consciousness recognizes the danger her companions are in, and suddenly a dozen golden threads lash themselves to the platform and hold it in the air just before it hits the lava. Seleucia was not so lucky. The divine body of Aglaea they resided in fell into the pool, and Aglaea's bracelet followed shortly after. But that's okay. She was always prophesied to die in a pool of gold. It's good that she at least got the chance to help her friends one last time before she disappeared for good. Hyacinth takes custody of the coreflame of the sky, and the party tries to find their way out of the fortress, which is a bit tricky since it is starting to fall apart without a titan to hold it all together. And you know, maybe I spoke a little too soon with regards to Aglaea, as it rises from the ashes like a phoenix, puppeted by the black tide. The untethered power of this giant titan bird shakes the foundation of the fortress, but Solibus and Lunibus catch everyone before they fall, and Hyacinth, Phainon, and the Trailblazer are able to strike the final decisive blow. For real this time, but we're not out of the woods just yet. You remember how Phainon entrusted Cipher with the protection of Kephale's coreflame and Akama's safety while he was away, and how I said she's already been doing that for a long time already? Well, it turns out that during one of her attempts to steal a fragment of the Dawn device for funsies over 1,000 years ago, Cipher had infiltrated the priests of Kephale, disguising herself for months as an acolyte. One night as she was working on her heist, Chaplain Amphoreus mistakes her for his most trusted apprentice, and as he lays slowly dying of old age, he reveals a secret that he's been keeping. He's been concealing a vital piece of information from the people of Akama, words left behind by Kephale before they turned to stone. And that secret is that the Dawn device is only going to protect Akama for the next 300 years. As the chaplain lay dying, he asks Cipher, who he still thinks is Atticus, to tell the people of Akama the harsh truth about the deadline that Kephale set for them. And Cipher decides to put her powers of trickery to good use. Instead of telling people the truth, she dons the appearance of Atticus and proclaims that the Dawn device will protect the people of Akama forever. And remember, the power of the Trickery Titan can turn lies into reality, but only as long as people continue to believe in them. So this simple lie of Cipher's managed to buy Akama an additional 700 years of protection. But to keep that lie alive, she had to separate herself from everybody else. especially Aglaea, who could have learned the truth in an instant if she read Cipher's heart with her threads. And now her job is done. Time's up. After a long game of cat and mouse, darting around Styxia, Cipher is finally cornered by the Flame Reaver, who kills her unceremoniously. But without Cipher to power the lie, the spell breaks. The sky turns red, and it's not long before reality itself starts wearing thin around the edges. And in the sky, the core flame within Hyacinth recognizes the change in the Dawn device immediately, which makes sense. The Dawn device was a gift to Kephale from Aquila, after all. Desperate to protect the people in Akama, Hyacinth begs Dan Heng to warp her to the vortex so that she can return the core flame as quickly as possible. After that, she intends to remain in the sky to mitigate whatever damage she can. That would allow her to fulfill her prophecy of mending dusk and dawn. But it might be a bit late for damage mitigation as the black tide has swept over the entire city. So there's no time to dwell on anything. We have to obtain Kephale's core flame, and quickly. But the question is, where is it? Where did Cipher put it? Because it's certainly not in the cube that the Council of Elders thought they had it in, which also means that Kindness ended up dying while praying to an empty box. So I guess that's pretty fitting. Phainon reasons that Cipher would have put the core flame in the safest place possible, which means that they should simply trust her and get to the Vortex of Genesis as quickly as possible. The fastest way would be for Dan Heng to just warp Phainon there with Fagusa's spirit water. The only problem is, when the sky went dark, all of Fagusa's spirit water started to dry up, so we can't use that trick anymore. And to add insult to injury, the Flame Reaver picks a perfect time to show up, saying stuff like the world must be reset, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because it implies that he doesn't want it to be reborn, but instead wants things to rewind. Curious? But they can't waste time fighting this guy. We have other things to do. We gotta go find the core flame. And fortunately, Mighty and Castorus show up just in time to challenge the Reaver head-on, giving Phainon, Dan Heng, and the Trailblazer an opening to escape through Triby's Sentry Gate. But they still don't stand a chance against the Reaver. In fact, they fall to his blade rather quickly, which means it doesn't take long for the Reaver to catch up to the Trailblazer, Dan Heng, and Phainon. And since they're in the bathhouse, Dan Heng decides to stay behind to challenge him. And he means business. We haven't seen him do a full shift into his Vidyadhara form in a while. Dan Heng has an advantage here because he has very good control over water, and this is a bathhouse that happens to be full of water. So he's very confident that he can at least buy us some time. He just has to not die. They make it back to the Trailblazer's room in the bathhouse, still looking for any traces of remaining spirit water of Fagusa so that they can get to the vortex. But instead of spirit water, they find Trinon, who explains that Bartolos is actually Zagreus, who was kept alive by another one of Cipher's lies, as well as the energy that's lingering within Kephale's core flame, which is in his stomach. With a few choice words shared, he vanishes and leaves the core flame behind. Phainon enters the vortex alone, his name obscured since, well, Phainon was always a fake name to begin with, and now there's no one left who recognizes that name. Except for Lygus, who's standing around talking about how he's witnessed countless heroes reaching this point, but how none of them have ever managed to move beyond it. He claims that this is expected as it is within their calculations, and by their I do mean their, like the Eon version of their, which means he's likely referencing Noose, since Lygus has caught their glance before, and also because Noose calculates things absolutely, so this kind of, fits. And he claims to be the ultimate observer and encourages Phainon to just pay him no mind and complete the flame chase. He's just here to watch. But he does repeat a line from the prophecy. He says, "All shall bid farewell to one, and that person alone will witness the miracle. Such is the will of fate." And after that, Phainon turns to Cyrene as she approaches and asks if she is that person, the true witness to the story. And she responds with a simple, "Of course." Well, it's actually hard to say if that's exactly what they mean, because it is possible that she's responding to Lygus's question of whether or not this epic of endless cycles will finally turn a new page. Of course is a pretty good answer to that question as well. And that, my friends, is where we end things this time around, on the worst cliffhanger ever. But it's okay, it's fine. The next installment is just around the corner, and we can wait. I am very, very patient. I am nothing if not patient. So for now, I'm going to bid you adieu. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little recap, and I'm gonna see you guys in part 5. Bye-bye for now.